In a small town, where dreams often feel just out of reach, Katie Simmons stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying to find the courage to face another day. The reflection staring back at her told a story of countless tears shed in silence, of lunches spent alone in empty classrooms, and of a young girl who had learned to make herself invisible. For 3 years, Katie had endured the whispers, the mockery, and the cruel social media posts. It wasn't just about her clothes or her quiet nature anymore. The bullying had evolved into something more systematic, more crushing. Each morning, she would check her phone, her heart racing, wondering what new cruel message awaited her. But today was different, not because the bullying had stopped, but because a single envelope lay on her desk, her prom ticket. She had purchased it in a moment of hope, or perhaps defiance, though she still wasn't sure if she would actually go. The thought of walking into that decorated gymnasium alone made her stomach churn. What Katie didn't know was that 3,000 miles away, in a bustling studio in Los Angeles, someone had read her story. Someone who understood what it meant to feel different, to be judged, to struggle with self-doubt. Someone who was about to change everything. The story had reached Zendaya through a series of coincidences, a local teacher's social media post, shared and reshared until it caught the attention of someone who knew someone who worked with the star. The post described a talented young artist who had stopped sharing her drawings because classmates had turned them into cruel memes. A girl who now ate lunch in the art room, using her break to create beautiful worlds where kindness prevailed. In these worlds Katie painted, no one sat alone. No one was mocked for being different. No one had to pretend to be busy with their phone while watching others laugh and socialize in tight-knit groups. These paintings were her escape, her way of creating the reality she wished she could experience. As Katie traced her fingers over the prom ticket, she remembered the day she bought it. Ms. Brooks, her art teacher, had encouraged her, saying, "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is show up, even when we're scared." Ms. Brooks was the only one who had seen Katie's newest paintings, the ones that featured a girl who looked a lot like Katie, standing tall despite the shadows around her. What Katie didn't realize was that Ms. Brooks had done more than just offer encouragement. She had spent months quietly documenting Katie's journey, collecting her artwork, and reaching out to anyone who might be able to help this talented, hurting young soul find her light again. The bullying had started in freshman year when Katie won the district art competition. Her realistic portrait of her grandmother had captured not just the elderly woman's features, but the wisdom and warmth in her eyes. While the local paper celebrated her talent, some classmates accused her of tracing, of cheating, of thinking she was better than everyone else. The accusations morphed into isolation, and isolation became a daily reality. Now, as a senior, Katie had mastered the art of invisibility. She knew which hallways to take to avoid the main crowds. She knew when to keep her head down and when it was safe to look up. She had learned to silence her voice in class discussions, even when she knew the answers, because speaking up meant becoming a target. But there was one thing Katie couldn't hide: her talent. Even as she tried to make herself smaller, her art continued to speak volumes. The murals she created for the elementary school, the illustrations she contributed to the local library's reading program, the sketches that found their way into the town's art gallery, they all told the story of someone who saw beauty in a world that hadn't always been kind to her. What Katie didn't know, as she stood there contemplating whether to return the prom ticket for a refund, was that her art had already set something extraordinary in motion. Her latest series, Invisible Girl, had particularly moved Ms. Brooks. The paintings showed a teenage girl gradually fading into various backgrounds: a crowded cafeteria, a school hallway, a dance floor. But in each piece, there was a small element that remained vibrantly colored, a butterfly, a flower, a star, suggesting that even in her invisibility, something within her refused to fade completely. These were the images that had made their way to Zendaya's team. These were the pieces that had brought tears to the eyes of someone who had once felt just as invisible, just as misunderstood. These were the artwork that had inspired a plan that would remind Katie and countless others that being different wasn't a flaw. It was a superpower. As Katie finally turned away from the mirror, deciding that maybe she would skip prom after all, her phone buzzed. It was probably another group chat she had been deliberately left out of, or perhaps another anonymous message telling her what was wrong with her. But this time it was different. This time it was Ms. Brooks. "Katie, I need you to stay after school today. It's about your art submission for the senior showcase. It's important." Katie felt her heart sink. Had someone complained about her work again? Had they found something wrong with it? She slipped her phone into her pocket, grabbed her backpack, and headed downstairs, unaware that she was walking toward a moment that would change everything. The day passed as most days did, Katie navigating the halls like a ghost, sitting alone in classes, finding solace in her sketchbook during breaks. But there was something different in the air, a kind of electricity she couldn't quite understand. She noticed whispered conversations, stopping when she approached, but not in the usual cruel way. These whispers seemed excited. She pushed the thought away, knowing better than to hope. After the final bell, Katie made her way to the art room, her safe haven. The familiar smell of paint and clay welcomed her, but something felt off. Ms. Brooks wasn't at her usual spot by the supply cabinet. Instead, she was standing by Katie's latest piece, the centerpiece of her Invisible Girl series, with an expression Katie had never seen before. "Katie," Ms. Brooks said, her voice trembling slightly, "your art, it's done more than you. No, it's reached people, important people, people who understand what it means to feel invisible." Katie stood frozen, unsure whether to brace for bad news or dare to hope for something good. She had learned the hard way that hope was a dangerous thing, that it made disappointment cut even deeper. What she didn't know was that at that very moment in a hotel just 20 minutes away, Zendaya was preparing for what would become one of the most meaningful moments of her own career. The star who had grown up in the spotlight, who had faced her own battles with bullying and self-doubt, was about to show a young artist that invisibility wasn't her destiny. As Katie stood in that art room, her future was about to transform in ways she couldn't imagine. The prom ticket in her desk drawer, the one she had been planning to return, was about to become more than just a piece of paper. It was about to become a symbol of something powerful, a reminder that sometimes when we feel most alone, the universe conspires to show us that we are seen, we are valued, and we are worthy of extraordinary moments. Little did Katie know, her story of isolation was about to become a testament to the power of kindness, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, someone somewhere sees our light, and sometimes that someone has the power to help us shine brighter than we ever thought possible. The hallways of Riverside High School held more secrets than anyone knew. Behind its brick walls and polished floors, countless stories unfolded, and daily. But none quite like what was about to happen in room 217, the art room where Katie Simmons had found her only refuge for the past 3 years. Ms. Brooks's words hung in the air like suspended paint droplets, each one holding the potential to color Katie's world in entirely new shades. "Your art has reached people," she had said. But what Katie didn't realize was just how far those ripples had traveled, crossing state lines and touching hearts in ways she never imagined possible. In that moment, as Katie stood before her Invisible Girl series, Her hands fidgeting with the worn edges of her sketchbook, Miss Brooks was already part of an intricate plan months in the making. The art teacher had spent countless evenings corresponding with Zendaya's team, sharing not just Katie's artwork but the story behind each piece. The story of a girl who spoke through colors when words failed her, who painted light even when surrounded by darkness. 3 weeks earlier, in a sun-drenched Los Angeles studio, Zendaya had sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by photographs of Katie's paintings. The actress, known for her own advocacy against bullying, had been particularly moved by one piece, a self-portrait where Katie had painted herself transparent except for her hands, which were vibrantly colored and holding a paintbrush. It was a powerful statement about finding strength in one's passion, even when the world makes you feel invisible. Now, as Katie waited nervously in the art room, she had no idea that her world was about to shift on its axis. She didn't know that Zendaya had already flown into town, that a hotel room was filled with designers and stylists, all preparing for a moment that would remind everyone watching that kindness has the power to change lives. Ms. Brooks moved toward her desk, pulling out a large portfolio that Katie had never seen before. "Before I show you something, I want you to understand how special your gift is, Katie. Your art. It doesn't just show what you see, it shows what others feel but can't express. That's rare, that's powerful." Katie's eyes followed her teacher's movements, confusion mingling with curiosity. The portfolio contained prints of her work, but they weren't just simple copies. They were professional photographs, beautifully shot and mounted. Each one was accompanied by a comment, a reaction, a story from someone who had connected with her art. "These came from all over the country," Ms. Brooks explained, her voice soft but filled with pride. "When your work was shared online, it struck a chord. People saw themselves in your invisible girl. They saw their own struggles, their own journey. But most importantly, someone very special saw something extraordinary." Katie's heart thundered in her chest as Ms. Brooks revealed a letter, elegant and official-looking, with a Hollywood Studios letterhead. Her hands trembled as she took it, her eyes scanning the words that would change everything. "Your artwork has touched many hearts, but none more so than Zendaya's. She sees in your paintings the same struggles she once faced, the same resilience she had to find." The letter continued, but Katie's vision had blurred with tears. Not tears of sadness this time, but of recognition. Someone had seen her, really seen her. Not the invisible girl in the hallway, not the target of cruel jokes, but the artist who poured her heart onto canvas. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Ms. Brooks's classroom door opened, and in walked the school principal, Mr. Howard, followed by a woman Katie didn't recognize, someone whose professional demeanor and sleek outfit screamed Hollywood. But it was the third person who made Katie's world stop spinning. Zendaya herself stood in the doorway of room 217, not as a distant celebrity, but as someone who understood. Someone who had read Katie's story in her art and recognized a kindred spirit. The actress's presence wasn't loud or flashy. Instead, it carried the same quiet strength that Katie put into her paintings. "Your art," Zendaya said, her voice warm and genuine. "It tells the truth about what so many of us go through. The feeling of being unseen, unheard, but also the strength it takes to keep creating, to keep believing in yourself when it feels like no one else does." Katie stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This had to be a dream, right? One of those vivid daydreams she often lost herself in while sketching? But no. The gentle squeeze Ms. Brooks gave her shoulder was real. The encouraging smile from Mr. Howard was real. And most incredibly, Zendaya walking toward her, holding one of her paintings, was absolutely real. "I saw this one first," Zendaya said, holding up the transparent self-portrait with the colored hands. It reminded me of my own journey, how sometimes the only thing that feels real is what we're passionate about, what we create. For you, it's art. For me, it was acting and dancing. They became my way of being seen, of being heard. The Hollywood producer, Katie would later learn her name was Lisa Chen, stepped forward with a sleek black folder. "We want to do something special," she explained. "Something that shows others like you that they're not alone, that their stories matter, that their art matters." Inside the folder was an invitation. Not just any invitation, but one that would transform Katie's prom night into something extraordinary. Zendaya wasn't just there to meet her. She was there to accompany her to prom, to stand beside her as she stepped out of the shadows and into her own light. "But it's more than just prom," Zendaya continued, her eyes bright with excitement. "We want to showcase your art, Katie, a special exhibition right here at your school on prom night, your Invisible Girl series, shown alongside stories from other young artists who've faced similar struggles. A reminder that none of us is truly invisible when we have the courage to share our truth." Katie's hands shook as she held the invitation. The paper was thick, expensive, nothing like the simple prom ticket hidden away in her desk drawer at home. But it wasn't the quality of the paper that made it precious. It was what it represented. A bridge between who she had been forced to become and who she truly was. Ms. Brooks watched with tears in her eyes as her student, who had spent so long trying to disappear, began to slowly emerge. The girl who ate lunch alone in the art room, who spoke through paintings rather than words, was being given a chance to share her voice with the world. "There's more," Lisa added, opening a second folder. "We've arranged for a documentary team to follow your journey, not just to prom, but through the preparation of your art exhibition. Your story, Katie, has the power to help others feel less alone." The air in room 217 felt charged with possibility. The same room where Katie had hidden from bullies, where she had poured her pain onto canvas, was now becoming the launching pad for something beautiful, something transformative. Zendaya reached out, gently touching one of Katie's paintings. "Art has this amazing power to turn pain into beauty, to take our darkest moments and create light from them. That's what you've done here, Katie. And now, we want to help you share that light with others who might be sitting in darkness, feeling just as invisible as you once did." As the reality of what was happening began to sink in, Katie felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the cautious, fragile hope she usually allowed herself, but something stronger, more substantial. It was the kind of hope that comes from being truly seen, truly understood. The afternoon light filtered through the art room windows, casting long shadows that seemed to dance around them. But for once, Katie didn't feel the need to hide in those shadows. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like stepping into the light might not be so scary after all. What none of them knew then was that this moment in room 217 was just the beginning. The story of a bullied teen artist and a Hollywood star who saw herself in those paintings would soon capture hearts across the nation. But more importantly, it would remind countless others that their stories matter, that their art matters, that they matter. As the sun began to set outside Riverside High School, casting a golden glow through the windows of room 217, plans were being made, dreams were taking shape, and an invisible girl was finally beginning to see her own light. The prom was still weeks away, but something extraordinary had already begun, a transformation that would ripple far beyond the walls of one high school, touching lives in ways none of them could yet imagine. The weeks leading up to prom night transformed Riverside High School in unexpected ways. What began as a simple act of kindness from a Hollywood star had sparked something larger, something that rippled through the hallways like waves of change, touching lives far beyond Katie Simmons and her art room sanctuary. The documentary crew, led by an empathetic director named Maya, became a constant presence in the school. Their cameras captured not just Katie's journey, but the subtle shift in the school's atmosphere. The same hallways that had once echoed with whispered taunts now buzzed with a different kind of energy. Katie's mornings began to change too. Instead of rushing to school early to avoid crowds, she now arrived to find Ms. Brooks and a small team of art curators transforming the school gymnasium into a professional gallery space. The room that would host prom night was becoming something extraordinary, a space where art and celebration would intertwine in ways no one had imagined possible. "We're creating more than just an exhibition," one of the curators explained as Katie watched them work. "We're creating a conversation about visibility, about voice, about the power of art to heal." The walls that would later shimmer with prom night decorations were being fitted with professional lighting tracks, turning the space into a legitimate gallery. But it wasn't just the physical space that was changing. Katie's artwork, once hidden in sketchbooks and tucked away in corners of the art room, was being professionally framed and mounted. Each piece from her Invisible Girl series was paired with a story, not just her own, but stories from other young artists across the country who had reached out after hearing about the exhibition. Zendaya, though not physically present during these preparations, remained constantly connected. Daily video calls kept her involved in every detail, from the exhibition layout to the prom night planning. But more importantly, these calls became a lifeline for Katie, a chance to talk with someone who truly understood her journey. The hardest part, Zendaya shared during one of their calls, is believing you deserve to be seen, that your voice matters, your art already knows this, now it's time for you to know it too. These conversations, captured by the documentary team, revealed the growing bond between the artist and the actress, two young women who had found strength in their creativity. The bullies who had once made Katie's life unbearable seemed unsure how to react to these changes. The presence of cameras, the transformation of their school into an art gallery, the regular appearances of Hollywood producers. It all created a new dynamic they hadn't expected. Some remained silent, while others began to see Katie in a different light, though she noticed how their sudden friendly overtures carried the weight of past cruelties. One particularly powerful moment came when Katie decided to include a piece she had never shown anyone, not even Ms. Brooks. It was a large canvas, different from her usual style. Instead of making the subject transparent, this painting showed a crowd of students, all rendered in shades of grey, while scattered throughout were bursts of color, other invisible students, each caught in moments of quiet creativity or resilience. "This isn't just my story anymore," Katie explained to the documentary crew as they filmed her hanging the piece. "It's about all of us who've ever felt invisible. Sometimes being unseen gives you a unique perspective. You notice others who are hiding in plain sight too." The exhibition preparation coincided with another transformation, Katie's own. Working with Zendaya's stylist team, she began to explore how fashion, like art, could be a form of self-expression rather than self-protection. The girl who had once hidden behind oversized hoodies and strategic invisibility was learning to embrace visibility on her own terms. "Style isn't about fitting in," Zendaya explained during one of their virtual styling sessions. "It's about feeling comfortable in your own skin, about wearing what makes you feel strong." Together, they chose a prom dress that incorporated elements of Katie's artwork, a stunning piece that would later become a symbol of her transformation. As news of the upcoming exhibition spread, something unexpected began to happen. Other students started coming forward with their own stories. The documentary team's presence created a safe space for conversations that had never happened before. Athletes admitted to feeling pressured to maintain certain images. Popular students confessed to their own insecurities. The mask of high school hierarchy began to crack, revealing the shared humanity underneath. Ms. Brooks watched this transformation with quiet pride. The art room, once Katie's sole sanctuary, became a gathering place for students wanting to contribute to the exhibition. Some shared poetry, others photographs or sculptures, each piece adding to the larger narrative about visibility, acceptance, and the courage to be seen. Art has always been about connection, Ms. Brooks observed to the cameras. What we're seeing here is proof that when one person has the courage to share their truth, it gives others permission to do the same. The school administration, initially cautious about the attention, began to embrace the project as they saw its impact. Principal Howard worked with Lisa Chen to develop a permanent program that would combine art therapy with anti-bullying initiatives. Katie's story was becoming a catalyst for institutional change. One afternoon, about a week before prom, Katie arrived at school to find something remarkable. The wall where she had once been cornered by bullies had been transformed overnight. Students had covered it with a collaborative mural, hundreds of small paintings and messages, each expressing something that had once made them feel invisible. At the center was a quote from Katie's exhibition statement: "We are all visible if only we have the courage to see each other." The documentary crew captured Katie's reaction as she stood before the wall, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of pain or shame. They were tears of recognition, of seeing her own struggle reflected in the honest expressions of her peers. The very people who had once walked past her without a glance were now sharing their own vulnerabilities, inspired by her courage. Zendaya's influence extended beyond the artistic elements of the project. Her team worked with local mental health professionals to ensure that as Katie's story gained attention, she had the support system she needed. Regular counseling sessions helped her process the changes happening around her, while group workshops gave other students tools to address bullying and social anxiety. The prom dress fitting became another pivotal moment. In a private session, arranged by Zendaya's team, Katie stood before a mirror in a creation that left her speechless. The dress, a collaboration between a renowned designer and Katie herself, incorporated elements from her paintings. Delicate brushstrokes transformed from transparent to vibrant colors, telling the story of her journey from invisibility to self-expression. "This isn't just about looking beautiful for one night," the designer explained as cameras captured a moment. "It's about wearing your story with pride, about turning pain into art and art into strength." As prom night approached, the energy in Riverside High School continued to shift. The exhibition space was nearly complete. Katie's artwork, professionally displayed alongside contributions from students across the country. The documentary crew had captured hundreds of hours of footage, telling not just Katie's story, but the larger narrative of transformation that had swept through the school. What started as a surprise from a compassionate celebrity had evolved into something more profound, a movement about visibility, acceptance, and the power of artistic expression. The prom was no longer just a dance. It had become a celebration of authenticity, of courage, of the beauty that emerges when we allow ourselves and others to be truly seen. In the final days before the event, Katie spent hours in the art room, completing one last piece for the exhibition. This one was different. Instead of focusing on invisibility, it celebrated visibility. The canvas exploded with color, showing figures stepping into light, each one carrying something that made them unique. In the corner, she painted a small butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, its wings catching the first rays of sun. "Sometimes," Katie explained to the documentary team as she put the finishing touches on the painting, "we need someone else to show us that we deserve to be seen before we can believe it ourselves. Zendaya did that for me. Now maybe this exhibition can do that for others. As the sun set on the last day of preparation, Katie stood in the transformed gymnasium, surrounded by her art and the stories it had helped others share. Tomorrow, she would walk through these doors with Zendaya by her side, no longer invisible, no longer afraid. But tonight, in the quiet moment before everything changed, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of the journey that had brought her here. The cameras captured her silent reflection, the peace in her expression, the strength in her stance. The invisible girl had found her light, and in doing so, had helped others find theirs too. Tomorrow would bring its own magic, but this moment, this quiet acknowledgement of transformation, was a different kind of beautiful. Prom night at Riverside High School dawned, unlike any other in the school's history. The morning light filtered through the gymnasium's windows, catching the professional gallery lighting and creating prisms of color across Katie's artwork. The space had been transformed into something magical, part art gallery, part fairy tale, ballroom, and completely unprecedented. In Katie's bedroom, hours before the event, a team of stylists worked their magic while documentary cameras captured every moment. The dress they helped her into was more than just fabric and thread. It was a piece of art itself. The designer had taken inspiration from Katie's Invisible Girl series, creating a gown that seemed to transform from transparent to vibrant colors as she moved, just like the figures in her paintings. "There's someone here to see you," Katie's mum called from downstairs, her voice carrying a hint of excitement she couldn't quite contain. Footsteps on the stairs, and then there was Zendaya, already dressed for the evening in a complimentary gown that had been carefully designed to pair with Katie's while letting the young artist remain the focus of attention. "Ready to be visible?" Zendaya asked softly, understanding in her eyes as she took in Katie's nervous expression. The question carried weight beyond the surface, beyond the sparkle of makeup and the shimmer of fabric. It was about stepping into one's truth, about choosing to be seen. The drive to school was surreal. The documentary team had arranged for a vintage car, its classic lines a perfect backdrop for this modern fairy tale. But what awaited them at Riverside High School exceeded even the most ambitious dreams. The line of people stretched around the block, not just students dressed for prom, but community members, art enthusiasts, and families, all there for the exhibition opening that would precede the dance. "Remember," Zendaya whispered as they approached the entrance, "tonight isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about celebrating who you've always been, an artist brave enough to tell the truth through her work." The doors opened, and Katie stepped into her transformed world. The gymnasium had become an ethereal space where art and celebration merged seamlessly. Her paintings, professionally lit and mounted, created a narrative path through the room. But what took her breath away wasn't just her own work. It was how it had inspired others. Between her pieces were installations created by other students, each one sharing their own stories of feeling invisible. The football captain had contributed a powerful photograph of himself sitting alone in the locker room, surrounded by empty jerseys. The head cheerleader had created a collage of social media posts versus diary entries, revealing the contrast between public perception and private struggles. The crowd parted as Katie and Zendaya made their way through the exhibition. The documentary cameras followed, capturing not just their progress, but the reactions of those around them. There were tears, yes, but also smiles of recognition, nods of understanding, and countless whispered thank yous from people who had found pieces of their own stories in Katie's art. Near the center of the exhibition space, Katie stopped before her newest piece, the one she had completed just yesterday. In the gallery lighting, the butterfly emerging from its chrysalis seemed almost alive, its wings catching imaginary sunlight. Beside her, Zendaya squeezed her hand. "This is what courage looks like," the actress said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, not the absence of fear, but the decision to spread your wings anyway. The formal opening of the exhibition had been planned as a small ceremony, but it evolved into something more organic, more powerful. Students began spontaneously sharing their stories, stepping forward to stand beside pieces that resonated with them. The documentary crew captured it all. This unexpected outpouring of truth and connection. Principal Howard's speech was brief but impactful. Tonight, we're not just celebrating art on these walls, we're celebrating the courage it takes to be seen, to stand in our truth. Katie Simmons didn't just create beautiful paintings, she created a space where we could all be a little more honest, a little more visible. As the exhibition portion of the evening drew to a close, the space began its final transformation. For the prom itself, the lighting shifted, music began to play, and the art gallery turned ballroom took on yet another layer of magic. But unlike proms of the past, this one carried a different energy. The usual social barriers seemed to have dissolved, replaced by something more authentic. The traditional first dance began, but not in the traditional way. Instead of a single spotlight on a prom king and queen, the entire room was bathed in soft, colorful light. Zendaya led Katie onto the dance floor, but they weren't alone for long. Other couples joined them, not just romantic pairs, but friends, siblings, teachers, and students, all moving to the music together. "Look around," Zendaya whispered to Katie as they danced. "Really look. No one's invisible tonight." She was right. The usual cliques had dissolved. The student who had once been Katie's worst bully was deep in conversation with a freshman about one of the art pieces. The star quarterback was teaching art club members his dance moves. Masks were slipping, walls were falling, and genuine connections were forming. The documentary cameras captured it all, this beautiful chaos of authenticity. But they also caught the quiet moments. Katie's former tormentors approaching her with genuine apologies. Students discovering their own artistic talents through the inspiration of the exhibition. And countless conversations that began with, "I never knew someone else felt this way too." As the night progressed, something remarkable happened. Students began adding to the exhibition, taping notes and small sketches next to pieces that moved them. The walls began to fill with their responses, their stories, their own moments of choosing visibility. The art was no longer static. It had become a living, breathing conversation. Near midnight, when the dancing was in full swing, Katie slipped away to a quiet corner of the exhibition. She stood before her original self-portrait, the one with the transparent figure and colored hands. Zendaya found her there, both of them taking a moment to reflect on how far they'd come from that first meeting in the art room. "You know what's beautiful?" Zendaya said, gesturing to the crowded dance floor visible through the exhibition space. "Every person out there who felt invisible now knows they're not alone. Your art did that. Your courage did that." The documentary crew captured Katie's response, not in words, but in the way she straightened her shoulders, in how she no longer tried to make herself smaller. The invisible girl had become impossible to ignore, not because she was standing next to a Hollywood star, but because she had finally embraced her own light. As the prom began to wind down, something spontaneous and beautiful occurred. Students gathered around Katie's butterfly painting, and someone started a new tradition. One by one, they wrote their names on small paper butterflies, attaching them to a blank wall space beside the painting. Each signature represented a promise. Uday, to see others, to be seen, to help create a world where no one feels invisible. The documentary cameras panned across the faces in the crowd, tears streaming, smiles beaming, connections forming. This wasn't just a high school prom anymore. It wasn't even just an art exhibition. It had become a movement, a moment of collective recognition that would ripple out far beyond this one night. In the final moments of the evening, as the last Dance was announced. Zendaya gathered everyone in a circle. Tonight wasn't about making one person visible, she said, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. It was about remembering that we all deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be celebrated for exactly who we are. The circle of students, teachers, and community members joined hands. The music played softly, not a typical prom song, but true colors, and voices began to join in. The documentary cameras captured this final, powerful image. Hundreds of people, connected in a circle, singing about seeing the truth and beauty in each other. As the last notes faded and the lights came up, Katie looked around at what her art had helped create. The gymnasium walls were covered not just with her paintings now, but with hundreds of responses, stories, and promises. The invisible had become visible. The unheard had found their voice. Outside, as people began to leave, the night sky was filled with stars. Katie and Zendaya stood on the steps of Riverside High School, looking up at them. "You know what's amazing about stars?" Zendaya asked, smiling. "They're always there, even when we can't see them. Sometimes they just need the darkness to show how brightly they can shine." The documentary cameras caught Katie's smile, no longer hesitant, no longer hiding. She had learned something profound, that being visible isn't about being the brightest star in the sky. It's about having the courage to shine your own unique light, and in doing so, helping others find theirs. As the final shots were filmed, Katie's voice carried over the footage. "We all have an invisible girl inside us, waiting to be seen. Tonight showed me that when we have the courage to see each other, really see each other, something magical happens. We don't just become visible, we become connected. And in that connection we find our true strength." The night ended, but its impact was just beginning. Katie's story and her art would go on to inspire exhibitions in schools across the country. The documentary would reach millions, sparking conversations about bullying, artistic expression, and the power of being seen. But perhaps most importantly, in one small town, in one high school, the invisible had found their voice, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.